Underworld fans, my name is Claire, also known as Wonder Woman Cosplay, and I will be sharing with you how I put together my Selene for her new makeover from the Underworld movie Blood Wars. This is my rendition of the new look of Selene. So I will be sharing with you how I did my take on everything and what I thought was best for my look and my body to be able to recreate her. As we all know, our beloved character Selene has not really changed too much throughout the movies. So this movie though, we got a new makeover for her, which is very exciting with the new Northern Coven look. So let's just start with the first, most obvious part, which is the coat. So what I had to do was I had to go to my local Joann's and find the best fleece mixture fabric that I could find in the right shade that I wanted that was more of a gray tone from the edits of the new photos. And then I went with Simplicity pattern 5386. That's your matrix coat patterns. I went with the smallest size to fit me best and adjusted the length. The only thing you have to adjust with this pattern is you have to do it inside out. After you stitch it inside out, you have to cut down the length of the seam allowance, which is the 5/8 typically, so that you can have that actually sticking out of your coat because it's supposed to be showing. So for my rendition of this coat, I decided to go with a bunny fur because I was on a time crunch and I did not have time to actually find a coyote or wolf fur. That's actually what I think they used, but for my rendition I went with the bunnies because they also are a little bit cheaper if you're on a budget. So I got 4 bunnies and I hand-tacked everything around the edge of the coat, and then I stuffed it with stuffing to cover up a wire that's in here. So I have this round stiff shape that won't go anywhere, and it's holding all of the weight of this hood, because let me tell you, these furs get a little heavy. So past that though, I went to my Joann's again and I found another fur fabric that is actually very similar in color, but it was in stripes. So I made sure I cut the right color portion of it and cut it in strips and then attached it with a straight stitch all the way down both ends on the inside of the coat. That way when you fold it outward and have it sitting outward over top of your shoulders, it shows the fur really nicely. And now for the fun part that I'm sure you're all wondering how it was done, was the shoulder armor. Now hers is a little bit more complex than the other people in that coven because they actually allowed for a strap to go from their shoulder over across their body. Well, Selene doesn't have one. Yay, cinema magic. So what I had to do was I actually made my armor. I mostly make my armors out of leather. It's easier for me, and it may be a little more complex for others, and there may be other better options like foam or warbler or anything like that. You can do this out of any of those, but I chose leather. So what you have to do if you want to make your armor out of leather, which I did, you have to get the thickest veg tan that you can get, and then you lay out your pattern. Your pattern you make with fabric first. So I put my coat on my mannequin that I have, and I laid out my fabric over top of the coat on the shoulder. And that way I was able to cut everything to where I needed it to sit. And then after you've made your flat pattern, you lay it flat on top of the veg tan. You cut out your veg tan. Then you're ready for your tooling. The tooling, you have to wet the veg tan. And then you draw up your design. And don't do that with pen, you do it with a tool. There's a tool that you can actually carve into after you've drawn it out and adjusted your design. And then after everything's tooled, you stain everything black. The whole entire thing, inside and out, gets stained black. After that, what I use for my silver finish is a rub and buff, which is a cream that you can get from Michael's. They actually come in different colors. They come in silver, gold, and bronze. Obviously for this you need silver. And what you do is you put some on your finger. You cannot do this with any other application source. It has to be your finger. Then you rub it on very lightly and you just keep adding as you go if you want a more shiny metal look, or if you want the rustic look, you use less. and you control all of that by just rubbing it on and testing it out and seeing how it looks. After you have finished all of your rub and buffing, you let it sit for a little while, and then you actually have to get a shirt and buff it. It's all in the instructions. After that is your assembly time. Now, as you can see, this armor is in 3 pieces. The way that I assembled this was there is a piece, 2 pieces actually, of other leather that I have that I attached onto where the rivets are sitting here and on the inside. So this is kind of like your joint system right here, so that it looks like it's separate, but it's not. The 2 at the bottom I actually did connect because I wanted more stability up against my arm. After you've done that and you've put in all of your rivets, all of your designs, I suggest the double-sided round rivets because you need it on both sides, here and here. So that's for the look that's on their armor. Then I put them on snaps, so that way I can hide how it's been put together. So simply placed my armor back on my mannequin, up against the shoulder where I wanted it to sit. And then I found out where I wanted my snaps to go. I have 3 snaps on here so that it attaches in the front, it attaches on the top, and it attaches on the sides. And voila, that is how you magically have armor just sitting on your coat. Now the design that I went with the Celtic knot look that's on here, is actually mostly from the movie, but part of my own design, because I, again, only had the movie posters to go off of, and there was only a couple that showed the armor. So the circular portion was pretty easy to understand and see what it looked like in the photo. So that was their design. The portions on the strips, however, around the edges, this is actually supposed to be a twisted metal look. So what I did was I just took one of my straight cutting tools that you actually punch down and it slices at the leather. So what I did was I took my hammer and the tool and I just kind of punched down and made sideways slots on it. So what that does is it gives it that twisted look. And then outside of that was the Celtic knot strands. These are kind of a little bit of my own design because they didn't have full definition in the portrait, the picture. So what I had to do was kind of follow their work and then add my own work in here because it's all connecting in different spots. So it really, it can be your own interpretation, it can be theirs. Then for the rest, I actually used the chiseling tool that you use for these straight lines, and I just kind of went through and every little spot just kept punching and punching all these designs on here, so it had that really rustic, very rough metal look to it. So all of that, it has to be on the whole thing. The only thing that's smooth is these portions here where these rivets are, and everything else has to have that really rigid, rough metal look to it. Now the coat was the fun part because that's the new part, but she still has the rest of her old outfit, which is a little bit different. The only thing that they really changed a lot was the corset. I noticed that they didn't have the design on the front anymore, but everything else is very much the same. So what I did for mine was I went with the McCall's 7269 bodysuit pattern. This is a really good pattern. Just be very wary. If you have a longer midsection, like I have myself, you do have to add some inches to it for length. I added a couple of inches and it fit me perfectly afterwards. The only thing that you have to add to this bodysuit is a collar, which I did make that pattern myself so that it would sit properly because that's where the buckles also have to go. The rest of her outfit with the 2 bracers and the corset, I made mine with leather. So I went to my local Tandy and got a bunch of black suede leather. I did use a pattern for the corset slightly though. I will tell you what it is so that you can use it yourself and determine for yourself. It is the Simplicity 2067. I had to make a lot of adjustments, again, long torso, and I also had to make adjustments to the top and the bottom to make sure that it fit properly because the shapes were actually very different. especially in the back, because this dips down in the back where you want it to come up in the back. So I used it for the right body shapes around my curves around my torso, but after that I just made up the rest myself. So you interpret how you would like yours done. The bracers I didn't use any patterns for. I simply measured my wrists and I measured the top portions of my arm where I wanted it to end. Again, I made that with leather, suede leather, and the way that I did it was I put cord on the strips that were sticking up. So there is an inner lining, you put the cord down, and then you stitch right up against it so it creates that curve that you want for your lines. For the corset and the bracers, I used the same technique for the top and bottom. I simply rolled the leather over it and then did what we call a stitch in the ditch. There is a hidden stitch right in here, right where you can see the line, right up in there. You have to be very careful. You have to pull and make sure that it's going where it needs to. And you just hold it in place with your machine, stitch inside that portion, and you won't see the stitch, but it does hold everything together nicely on the inside. So it's simply just overlapped over the lining. So there's no need to finish any stitches on the lining or clean anything up. It just rolls right over it and then you attach your zippers. The final touch in Selene's new look is the hair. I actually was very fortunate, which started this project, and found a wig already exactly how I wanted it to look. It already had the dark on top and the blonde on the bottom. There's a little bit more blonde than I would like, so I may adjust it in the future, but it already came as seen. You can look it up online. There are a lot of places for maybe anime cosplays or things like that where they have these wigs already made like this, or you can get it specially made. If you have a problem finding the proper wig, I do suggest different techniques that I have found that work pretty well, where you can get a blonde wig and then you can just add the dark on top. If it is a human hair wig, you can dye it, but be very careful that you don't go too far down on the blonde because it will suck it up really fast. If you have a synthetic wig, which is most of what we use for cosplay and the easiest and cheapest to find, you can still get a blonde wig, and if you're dedicated enough, get a Sharpie so that you can actually color in all of this dark yourself. I have seen it done. It does work. Just be very careful, wear gloves. It is very messy. And that, my Death Dealer friends, is how I created the new look for Selene from Underworld Blood Wars. Thank you so much for tuning in, and make sure you pick up your copy on DVD or Blu-ray in stores now.